Hello and welcome to Tech of the Day. Today we are going to talk about develop solutions that use a relational database. But before going further, I received few feedbacks from you guys and I'm trying to improve my uh, screen quality and even the voice quality. Thank you for your feedbacks and keep giving me your feedbacks so that I can improve it and it will benefit both of us. Thank you. In this module, we will talk about Azure SQL Database. Create, read, update, and delete database entities by using code. So let's go. Azure SQL Database. In this lesson, we will cover Azure SQL Database, choosing the right SQL option in Azure, create a copy of an Azure SQL Database. So Azure SQL Database is a general-purpose relational database managed service in Microsoft Azure that supports structures such as relational data, JSON, spatial, and XML. SQL database drivers dynamically scalable performance within two different purchasing models, a vCore-based purchasing model and a DTU-based purchasing model. SQL Database also provides options such as columnstore indexes for extreme analytic analysis and reporting, and in-memory OLTP for extreme transactional processing. Microsoft handles all patching and updating of the SQL code base seamlessly and abstracts away all management of underlying infrastructure. SQL Database shares its code base with the Microsoft SQL Server database engine. With the Microsoft Cloud First strategy, the newest capabilities of SQL Server are released first to SQL Database and then to SQL Server itself. This approach provides you with the newest SQL Server capabilities with no overhead for patching or upgrading, and with these new features tested across millions of databases. So just to revise, you have two purchasing models: vCore-based compute purchasing and DTU-based throughput purchasing. It shares code and features with SQL Server. So traditional SQL Server, which we used to have, relational database managed service. So Microsoft manages all the patches and updates. SQL Database Server and SQL Database. Similar to SQL Server, the SQL Database Service has two concepts in its hierarchy: SQL Database Server. An SQL Database Server is a container for database instances. It provides the ability to establish sign-ins, create a firewall, and expose a tabular data protocol endpoint. A server is required to create databases. Client devices will connect directly to the logical server in Azure. SQL Database. An SQL database is the implementation of an individual database by using the service, and it includes its tables and any other feature. So you see here, SQL database consists of databases and in the tabular format. So there are three deployment options. Azure SQL Database deployment options. There are three: managed instance, single instance, and elastic pool. And SQL Database Platform as a Service, or PaaS, is passed on these three deployment options as a part of a collection of databases known as managed instance that contains system and user databases and shared set of resources. that is managed instance, as a single database with its own set of resources managed via a logical server, as a pooled database in an elastic pool with a shared set of resources managed via logical server, that is called elastic server in a pool. So there are many options available. So choosing the right SQL option in Azure, it's really important. In Azure you can have your SQL Server workloads running in a hosted infrastructure IaaS, or running as a hosted service PaaS. So it can be infrastructure as a service or it can be platform as a service. The key question that you need to ask when deciding between PaaS or IaaS is, do you want to manage your database, so apply patches and take backups, or do you want to delegate these operations to Azure? Depending on the answer, you have the options like Azure SQL Database and Azure SQL on Azure virtual machines. So if you want to go with the PaaS, platform as a service, then you can go with the Azure SQL Database, a fully managed SQL database engine based on the latest stable enterprise edition of SQL Server. This is relational database as a service, which can be also called DAS, same as PaaS or IaaS. It's a DAAS, hosted in Azure cloud, that falls into the industry category of PaaS. SQL database is built on a standardized hardware and software that is owned, hosted, and maintained by Microsoft. With SQL database, you can use built-in features and functionalities that require extensive configuration in SQL Server. When using SQL database, you pay as you go, with options to scale up or scale or out for a greater power or with no interruption. SQL database has additional features that are not available in SQL Server, such as built-in intelligence and management. SQL options or SQL Server weaknesses. We have talked about advantages a lot. Let's talk about weaknesses. So if you have SQL Server on VM virtual machine, then you need to manage backup and patches. You need to implement your own high availability solutions. That means you need to make sure that your solution or your SQL Server is highly available. There is downtime while changing the resources, so you need to manage all these things. If you have Azure SQL Database managed instance, then there is a still minimum number of SQL Server features that are not available in Azure SQL Database. Then SQL Server, which the normal SQL Server we have. No guaranteed exact maintenance time, but nearly transparent. So you don't know when it will be updated or maintained, and you might have some surprises, but of course they are transparent. Compatibility with the SQL Server version can be achieved only by using database compatibility labels. Then there is logical server, Azure SQL Database. Migration from SQL Server might be difficult. So if you have on-premises SQL Server database, then if you want to migrate from there, it might be a bit difficult. Some SQL Server features are not available. No guaranteed exact maintenance time. Same, it's nearly transparent but not exact time when it will be. Compatibility with the SQL Server version can be achieved only by using database compatibility labels. Private IP address cannot be assigned. You can limit the access using firewall rules. Creating an Azure SQL database. So in this demo, we will create a new SQL Server instance using the portal. and then create a new SQL database instance using the portal and the existing server which we just created, and then we need to query the SQL database instance using Azure CLI or PowerShell. So, and copy from one database to another database. Beside creating an SQL database, you can also copy an existing SQL database. The copy feature creates a transactionally consistent copy of the SQL database and deploys the copy as a new instance. So this is how it looks like in the Azure portal. A database copy is a snapshot of the source databases as of the time of the copy request. You can select the same server or different server, its service tier and compute size, and or a different compute size within the same service tier. After the copy is complete, it becomes fully functional independent database. At this point, you can upgrade or downgrade it to any addition. The logins, users and permissions can be managed independently. I'll show you just in a minute how to do that. And this is we're gonna use for copying Azure SQL database using Azure PowerShell. If you want to import some file from the Azure storage, you can back up that importing back file using PowerShell. Exporting, you can export a backup. Observing if export was successful, and then exporting and importing database is the same thing. Okay, let's go to and let's create SQL server. Okay, let's do like this. Azure SQL, you have many options as we talked. Azure SQL managed instance, SQL database, Azure Synapses and analytics. We don't need MySQL. We have already talked about Cosmos DB and database migration services. So we go with this one. Okay, it took already, and need to create a new one, SQL managed instance. So I'll name it AZ-203 SQL managed instance. I forgot to click on this. So okay, this is my resource group, and then I need to put instance name, managed instance name. So I would say AZ-203 SQL MI01 Europe North. Okay, yes, interesting thing to know. So your server name can only contain lowercase letters, numbers and dash, but can't start with dash or have more than 63 characters. So what I did here, I put MI. Okay, region. Okay, so interesting thing to know actually. You see general purpose and 8 vCores and 256 storage, and I cannot change it. Yeah, okay. And now I go with the, let me just zoom in, otherwise you will say you can't see the screen. Okay, and now I need to put server admin login. I'll keep delete it, so don't worry. AZ-203 SQL admin tag of the day 123 and tag of the day 123. Okay, let's go to networking. Here you see virtual network. It has already created new virtual network for me, and default subnet will be also created because so that's the thing actually. So if I had if I have chosen Azure SQL Server on SQL Server on virtual machine, then I will have to manage all these things myself. And now this is automatically managed, or at least gives you default settings, so you can go with it. Easy. Now, connection type private endpoint. You can say redirect. Redirect mode enables direct connectivity to managed instance, resulting in improved latency and throughput. This option requires ports 11,000 till 11,999 and 1433 open for traffic. So you need to add a firewall rule for that. So you can also say proxy, which is default. And if you want to enable public endpoint, otherwise you need to have this internet without using VPN and is for data communication only. Access is disabled by unless explicitly allowed. I will allow it. So allow access from Azure services. Now you can choose what you want. Internet. So my database will be allowed from internet for use. Well, that's a really bad thing anyone could do, but I don't care because I'm gonna delete it right away. Use as failover secondary. So for the geo replication, important thing to know. So for geo replication, if you want to have failover instance, it will be a geo redundant. So if I say yes, then primary instance, then you need to configure the geo redundancy. I'll say no. And then review and create. It says the cost is 803 euros per month. Well, let's go to this one. I have oops, I thought I selected a region, but I did not. Strange. Okay, up. I'm gonna do Europe. Let's go with Europe, Switzerland North. Done. Review and create. It's reviewing my settings, what I just said, and you see, oops, again, what is remaining? That does not say anything. Okay, let's try now. Requirement validation failed, and it does not. Sorry, I just found out that because of Corona, Azure is really down, so I cannot really go forward. You see these the status of Azure status, and here you have problems. No, not really. It's from January. If I say all, RCA service in West Central Europe. But this is something to do with the Azure availability, because high load on Azure cloud services recently. It was increased by 775%, and Microsoft is really enjoying this Corona period, but no employee there. Maybe so they are really experiencing some problems. Anyway, I'm not gonna continue with them. But yeah, that's what it should have, and then you can access it directly with if you just go to the networking, and you will have endpoints with your password. You can directly connect to your database, and same way you will have connection strings which you can use in your code directly. So I'm gonna go back to my as we talked previously, this is how you can copy actually with using Azure PowerShell. So you just need to say new Azure SQL Database copy. You say the resource group name, server name which you just created, and database name. So you just say the what database is, which database, and copy resource group name, so from which resource group. So in my example here I put the same resource group, copy resource group name and resource group name, so it's within the same resource group. Copy server name and the target server name. So this is the resource and database name. This is the copy is the target resource group and target server name, and copy database name, so copy of my sample database with this name. So you understand, you just need to say new AZ. This is the default format of Azure PowerShell. So you say new AZ SQL database copy, then you specify resource group name, server name, database name of the source, and then the copy resource group name, copy server name, copy database name of the target server and database and group. Simple, right? Same way you can simply import the backup file from Azure storage, and using PowerShell you can do that like this. Import request equals to this yeah, it's a script, so you have this variable, but you can also do like this without the scripting. New AZ SQL database import resource group name, server name, database name, and database max size bytes. Storage key, storage URI. That is interesting to know, because you need to specify the blob storage URI, the file location, the backup file location, and then you need to specify the login. So you say administrator login. Simple. We already talked about this. Let's go to create, read, update, and delete databases by using code. That's interesting to learn. So create, read, update, and delete databases and using code. So in this one we will talk about entity framework providers, modeling a database by using entity framework code, querying database by using Entity Framework Core. I hope many of you are familiar with Entity Framework Core, but if you are not, then please continue, or maybe you will learn something new. So I would suggest still to continue and keep watching this video. If not, then you can skip a little bit. Entity Framework. What is Entity Framework? Entity Framework is an object relational mapper library for Microsoft.NET that is designed to reduce the impedance mismatch between the relational and object-oriented worlds. So, if your data to make sure your database and your objects or models, or yeah, you can say entities in your C#.NET code are the same. The goal of the library is to enable developers to interact with the data stored in the relational database by using strongly typed .NET objects that represent the application's domain, and to eliminate the need for large portion of the data access plumbing code that they usually need to write to access the data in databases. So then you can easily use the link LINQ. And why do we need then Entity Framework Core? So Entity Framework Core is recent rewrite of the entire Entity Framework library to target .NET standard. Entity Framework Core can be used in .NET Framework application and .NET Core applications. This was built to be more lightweight and agile than the full Entity Framework by dropping many of the earlier features from Entity Framework and implementing the new, modern and extensible features at an agile pace. For new applications, we recommend considering using Entity Framework Core. Entity Framework providers are, mostly all of them provide Entity Framework. So SQL Server, SQLite, PostgreSQL, MySQL, MariaDB, MyCat, Firebird, DB2, Informix, SQL Server, Microsoft Access, most of them. You can just simply go to MySQL and to know about it. I will put these links in my description. So these are the simple nugget packages. For PostgreSQL, you have the nugget packages, and to modeling a database by using Entity Framework Core. To use Entity Framework to query, insert, update, and delete data using .NET objects, you first must create a model that maps the entity and relationships defined in a model to tables in a database. So you need to create models which a single model represents a table, and you need to create them in such a way that they represents even the relationship between the objects, so that you have the same foreign key structure in your tables. Entity Framework uses a set of conventions to build a model based on the shapes of your entity classes. You can specify additional configuration to supplement and override what was discovered by convention. The conventions can be applied to a model targeting by any store, and where targeting any relational database providers might also enable a configuration that is specific to a particular data store. So if we see this model, you have block ID, URL, description. Block ID simply becomes the you can say it can be primary key, and then you see here block database, then you say enumerable blocks, and in this database you are calling that model we just created here as blocks, and this block database will be later on used by the Entity Framework, and this will become our database. And then when we want to use the blocks, we will simply create a context from this block database context, db context, and then we will use this db context.blocks simply to use the Entity Framework Fluent API. You have an API from Microsoft simply to query the Azure SQL databases. which is almost similar like we used to have for entity framework. So please pay attention to Fluent API. Here on model creating, model builder, you have a model builder, an entity framework which specify some properties and some requirements. So you say has a key blog ID, property b.url is required, property description. So you simply specify that, and then it cannot be null. All those properties of SQL database you can specify directly from your C# code. You don't even need to go to your database and create tables. You have annotations. You have entity framework data annotations. So if you want to, you can apply attributes which are called data annotations to your classes and properties. Data annotation will override conventions but will be overwritten by a Fluent API configuration if it exists. So if you have these attributes, so if you say key, that means it becomes the primary key for the table blog, and the primary key will be blog ID. And you can put required, that means you say URL is required. It cannot be null before inserting, then there will be a validation. Then for the second, for DB context, which we just talked about, after you have a model, the primary class, your application interacts with system.data.entity.db context, often referred to as context class. You can use the DB context class associated to a model to write and execute queries, materialize query results as entity objects, track changes that are made to those objects, persist object changes back to the database, bind objects in memory to UI control. So DB context is the whole thing, is the whole connection between your database and your .NET application. So you simply have DB context which can write and execute queries and track changes, bind objects. You can use it for these tasks. Then you have, so to query database by using entity framework core, you use a link such as where method. So if you use links, you can directly use where methods like this. So what you do, you just say all blocks and you say context, which we just defined here. Block context, it's a initialized variable context. Then you say context.blocks to list. So here you just lazy loading all the contexts, all the blocks from the database, and then with the where condition you say some block if it contains where URL contains .NET, then you will have some blocks here. Or you can just say single, and then you can get only one. You can also use add method of db set and class to, and also you can say save changes. So you see here you created new block, you initialize the block model or a class which we just recently declared above, and we say context.blocks.add this block, and then you can say context.save changes. That means it will save your block into the database. Simple. Same way you can modify it, and then you say save changes. So what we want to do is, I'll just show you how to add an entity framework to a .NET project. Use entity framework to create database and table entities. Issue queries to SQL database using link and entity framework. That's really simple work. So if many of you already have done this, I will suggest you can watch my other videos, because it won't be so interesting for you. But if you want, you can stay here and watch my next demo. I have a simple application which uses Entity Framework core, and I just did it like this. I go to manage Nugget packages, and I have this Microsoft.Entity Framework core with version 3.0, and for identity I used another one, Nugget package, but you are not obliged to use it. I just used it because I'm using identity for my authentication in my application. Here, if you see here, I have if you see here, I have add DB context, and after that I have identity using identity user and identity role. So just because of this, I have entity framework and in memory. And if you look at this here, what I did, I just say services add DB context with my type of DB context, and in configuration I say use in-memory database because I don't want to use any database. It's just in-memory database. For some time it just creates a small database and can use it, but same way you can just change it and you can use your existing database, and you can specify the connection string here in the app settings. So that's all. It's really simple, easy to use, and you can use it anywhere. And if you see my AppDB context, it's basically it has nothing built in because I did not need to add anything, but I can add any DB model here, and by default it is implementing identity DB context. That means I will have by default all the roles, user, application in my database. It will by default implement them. So yeah, that's it. I hope you like it. It's easy and easy to use. You can just get started with it and you can work on it. So in this video we talked about Azure SQL Database, create, read, update and delete database entities using code. We did that. And we talked about entity framework, we talked about entity framework core, and we tried to create a database in Azure portal, but because Azure was down today, so I could not create something because of the corona. But so thank you for watching, and please like, share and subscribe. Hope you liked it, and please let me know in the comment section. Please let me know your feedback, and I will be happy to improve myself. So please say that in the comments. Thank you. And if you want to continue AZ-203, AZ-204 courses, you can continue watching this playlist. You can go to my channel and you can find the playlist as well there. And thanks for watching. Bye. See you.